So this video looks at Capafons, which is your contemporary study for the learning approach. I say this every time, but please remember that Capafons will not be named. It will just say, describe and evaluate or evaluate the contemporary study from the learning approach. And you need to remember that that's Capafons. Now, Capafons' aim was to see if systematic desensitization is a successful therapy for a fear of flying. He wanted to see if it's an effective treatment with this specific phobia and to see if it would still lead to the greatest success. They felt that systematic desensitization was an old treatment and they wanted to show that it is still a good choice for the treatment of the fear of flying. There were 41 participants in total, which were 8 males and 12 females. So those 20 were assigned to the treatment group, while 21 of them, which made up of 9 males and 12 females, were allocated to the control group, which were waiting for treatment. They were all randomly allocated to the groups. The two groups were balanced in terms of age, gender, and the strength of the fear. Participants were all volunteers who were recruited through a media campaign, and they were offered a free of charge treatment to their flying. It's really, really important that you remember here that the control group was still offered the therapy, but during the study they were just classed as waiting for treatment because otherwise it would be unethical to recruit participants and therefore hold back the treatment from them. The control group was therefore able to make comparisons against, but also to highlight the changes in the phobia over time without the treatment. Now this is really useful because it helps us to see a cause and effect relationship between the treatment and the fear of flying. The procedure of the study was the therapy, which was systematic desensitization itself. There were 3 phases. There was one for relaxation and imagination training, one for focusing on developing the hierarchy, and then the final phase, which was the application of the systematic desensitization therapy. The researchers measured the success of the therapy by using self-report scales and clinical interviewing, and they also recorded some physical variables. Now, those variables were: there was an interview to find out the fear of flying, a fear of flying scale that measured the levels of anxiety. There were 2 scales measuring a person's catastrophic thoughts, a video of a trip on a plane, and then physical measures such as heart rate, muscular tension, skin temperature. The dependent variable also had to be measured, so the DV was the level of the fear of flying. Now, an effective treatment would mean obviously that this is lowered or at least disappeared if it, that's the best case scenario. And the measures that they took to measure the DV were the answers to the 3 questions: how afraid of flying did you say you were? Do you travel by a plane where there is no alternative? And while flying, have you ever had the following symptoms or feelings? And then a list of answers which included things like sweating, etc., etc. The fear scales that were measured during the flight, the fear of what goes on before, and the fear about flying when not actually flying. Now, the scales to measure the catastrophic thoughts and anxiety included things such as heart rate, palm temperature, and muscular tension. Now, we've just talked about this in great detail on the last slide, but I've put it on the screen now so you can have a look through and make some notes from if you need to. Now, the treatment itself, after the interview, the participants watched a video of someone else taking a flight and the physical measures were taken in the university. There was a practice situation before the video where resting measures were taken. Now, this was then another interview which explained the next stage of the therapy. The therapy itself took place at the university and there were 2 one-hour sessions a week, so between 12 and 15 sessions in total, which meant that the treatment itself finished over 8 weeks. The treatment involved training in relaxation, imagination, and breathing techniques, and there was also a technique of stop and think, and a brief relation taught to help the actual phobic situation. There was no significant differences between the control group and the treatment group prior to the treatment, and that's really important to remember. It means that it was a good comparison to make. Now, these comparisons were made before and after the treatment, and there were no significant differences in the scores between the 2 times for the control group. Just 10% of the patients in the treatment group did not show significant changes in their fear after treatment. In about 5% of the patients, the fear may subside after time without treatment. Before and after measures showed that just the passing of time did not lead to any changes in the phobia, so leaving it for a long time didn't make it any better. Before and after measures for the treatment, including the self-report and the physical measures, showed that changes did occur, and you can see by the table on the screen in front of you that the treatment group had much better scores, showing that systematic desensitization had been effective in measuring the DV, which was the amount of fear that they felt when it came to flying. It was clear that the treatment group showed significant improvements in their fear compared with the control group. The researchers thought that the passage of time did not help with the treatment of the phobia. There was a failure of the treatment in 2 patients, thus the treatment must not work on everyone, and that's really, really important when we're making evaluation points at the end. Now, the control group that was used was carefully matched with the treatment group to gender, age, and the strength of fear. So this meant that they had a really good baseline measure for the phobia, so they could see if the treatment had been effective, which therefore gives it scientific credibility. The researchers used many measures to see if the phobia had reduced, including interviews, self-report measures such as scales and physical measures, and this gives it scientific credibility as well. They did not try and generalise the results past a fear of flying, which gives the results validity because they all relate to a fear of flying. The interviews discussed a fear of flying with the patients and therefore ensured that all patients did have this fear. In terms of weaknesses, the results can't be generalised to other fears because it would have been better if the researchers had tested this with other fears as well. A volunteer sample was used, which reduced generalisability, although the sample was matched to a control sample, which does increase generalisability overall. But don't forget that 10% of the patients, so 2 out of the 20, did not have a reduction in their phobia, which means that this does have limited application in the sense of it can't apply to everybody.